So before we get into your work at the House, please start by telling us a little bit about your life outside of the Capitol.
Sure, well, thank you. My life outside the Capitol, my regular day job is working as Director of Finance for a nonprofit on the east side in St. Paul here called Face-to-Face Health and Counseling. We run a day shelter in downtown St. Paul, helping youth who are homeless. And then we have, also there we have not just the day shelter, we have housing services to help house them. We have education and employment services to help get them connected in those areas. We also work with the Ramsey County to provide juvenile justice, restorative justice practices, helping people who might be interacting with the criminal justice system. And then in addition, we provide a lot of mental health services to folks in shelters, not only in our shelter, but in other shelters. And also we have a nurse practitioner-led clinic. So we're able to provide complete wraparound services to help youth who are at risk, and we serve youth 11 to 24.
And you were first elected in 2012.
That is correct. I came on in 2012, so my first session was in 2013. One of the big issues that was in my district at that point in time was water issues around White Bear Lake. It's where we were pumping out of the aquifer in an unsustainable rate, and it was having a negative impact on the surface features up there. And as I did more work, I realized that at the rate we were pumping in the whole East Metro, that in some areas that we would start getting to dangerous levels by 2035 to 2040 at the rates we're pumping. And so it's trying to figure out, okay, how do we address the groundwater in a way that it's sustainable for future generations?
Sure, and District 44A, that's where you represent now, is a little bit different than the district when you first came in?
That's correct. When I first came in, it was 43A, and it was White Bear Lake, the southern part of White Bear Lake, all of Mahtomedi, Birchwood, and Willerny, and then a chunk of Maplewood, not all of northern Maplewood, but a big chunk of it. With redistricting now, I no longer have White Bear or Mahtomedi or Willerny or Birchwood. Instead, I've picked up all of Little Canada, and with the redistricting, I will have almost all of Maplewood north of Maryland. So that'll be about 70%, 65 to 70% of Maplewood will be in the district.
You grew up in Maplewood, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I grew up off McKnight Larpenter, just two blocks from where my dad was raised.
Sure.
And just a couple of miles from where the family farm that my great-grandparents used to have. So long time resident in Maplewood, but also leaning toward the greater east side of St. Paul. There's not much difference between Maplewood and the east side of St. Paul. So east side is where I go to church up in Dayton's Bluff. It's where my grandfather used to work at what used to be Whirlpool down there. My grandmother on my mom's side, she worked at 3M, so it was very much as, kind of an East Metro type of person.
And when you talk to people in your district, what are some of the issues that are important to them?
I would say that one of the biggest issues that comes up is one that people would not initially think of is their concern is that we've become so polarized in our country. And while somebody might say, hey, what are you doing on mental health? What are you doing on education? They always come back to, I'm frustrated by how polarized we've got. And one of the things I like to point to is that there is actually a lot of work here that happens in a very bipartisan way. Over the last 5 years, I've chaired different committees now for 5 years. And in all the time that I've chaired committees in the House, I've chaired the subcommittee on water in the House. I've chaired the subcommittee on behavioral health. I'm currently chairing the Human Services Policy Committee. And in that 5-year period, I've only had 5 bills that have come out with no votes. And so all my bills in the first 4 years came out. Most of them got to the floor, passed. This past year, my omnibus bill, the House policy bill that I had, came out with 100% support of Republicans and Democrats when brought to the floor. And a lot of the work that happens here happens in a very bipartisan way. And that's where I spend a lot of time talking to people in our district is we may not always agree on everything, but it's important that we have respectful conversations and bring the dignity and statesmanship back to our institutions. And people have been very frustrated by what they've seen on a grand scale around. And so that's one of the things I spend a lot of time talking to people about, saying, I don't just talk it, I also take care to work importantly with not only the bills coming through my committee, but engaging my Republican colleagues and saying, how do we make this work? I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. Let's get together. And sometimes we'll push ourselves a little bit into the uncomfortable zone, but I find sometimes when we're both uncomfortable, but we can live with it, that sometimes is some of the best stuff that we do around here.
And what do you think the committee, as chair, what do you expect the committee to focus on in 2024?
I would say a lot of the focus that we're going to be seeing coming up in 2024 here is going to be in the mental health, behavioral health area. The problem is we've never consciously built out a system. We've got parts that are here and there, but we've never built to meet capacity. And there's several things that happen. Part of it is because we've got stigmas around mental health. They're not as great today as they were 16 years ago. We've made progress in that. And that's why I think we see a lot more demand, because people are feeling much more comfortable realizing that if I need help, it's okay to see a therapist. You know, I've been a person that's seen a therapist over the years as I've been dealing with different stressful situations, and it's helped me. And I see that with other people. It's like we're so used to, say, if we get a cut on our arm, we have no problem going to the doctor and getting stitched up. Sometimes somebody may have a traumatic situation that have occurred that they don't want to burden their family with. To be able to talk to somebody else and receive that care in short term is kind of like getting a stitch in your arm, and you're able to go on and remain very functioning. But if you don't get that stitch taken care of, it can get infected, it can get gangrene, you can die or lose an arm from it. Same with mental health. If you're not getting your services early on, it will escalate. And that's some of the things that we have to take a look at. And it's building out the capacity in the system so that when people need that help, they're not being boarded in an emergency room somewhere. They're able to get the appropriate level of care when they need it. And that's going to take a lot of work.
And we talked a little bit about it beforehand, but you're on the Health Committee, Human Services obviously, but also the Environment Committee.
Yes.
What do you like about being on the Environment Committee, and is there any issues you'd like to see addressed this year?
On the Environment Committee, it just so much as when I was young growing up, I used a lot of the state forest campgrounds and the state campgrounds. We would get out a lot. We did camping. Me and my siblings would go out hunting. My kids have been out hunting. So very much the outdoors area. And that also contributes to better health outcomes. That's where I see a cross between health and human services as an environment, is that a lot of times issues that we deal with carry over into the health world. And an example I'll use is that PFAS contamination, is that some of that is in the health world where they regulate the water coming out and what the drinking standards are, and they can force things from that side. But in terms of banning it in chemicals, that's done by the MPCA, the Minnesota Pollution Control Authority. And that's in the environment world. And so you want to make sure that they've got the tools, and we're saying these are chemicals that we've got to address and take care of. So it's what's in the environment, and then there's what comes out of the tap, what I call. And so as a result, I see a lot of crossover. An example right now that we see is in water quality issues. Nitrate issues is very big, is that in some parts of the state, 100% of the wells are testing as having nitrates in it or pesticides in it. Well, some of that comes into the health side, is what is being done, and how do you address that from the health side. So those two go hand in hand. You can say, okay, we keep it out, but what do we do to make sure that we've got good water coming out of the taps for people, not only in public systems, but private systems. So there gets to be a crossover between that. And in the environment world, we're also dealing with water sustainability. And what are we doing to make sure that our entire environment is being done in a sustainable way? Having had White Bear Lake in my district at one time, and seeing that when you overpump the aquifer, it causes the natural resource to go down, and it shows you're not using the aquifer in a sustainable rate. Well, I don't want to make sure that we're using it so that my great-grandchildren will be able to have enough water in the aquifer and not be in a situation that's dried up and there's no longer enough water there. And we've got enough water in the region. It's using a balance between surface water and groundwater, and figuring how do you make that work in a regional approach. And so those are the big challenges we've had. Something that I continue to work on and continue to focus on is how do we make that occur and make sure that the local communities still have independent control and figure out how they want to do it, but saying here are all the tools on the table. Not everybody can use groundwater, and we don't want everybody on surface water. We need to have that ability to go back and forth. So it's setting up the process where the locals can say, and we've done this in the last session, we've put money out there to get the locals together to figure out, okay, how do we do it? Who gets to use ground, who gets to use surface, and how do you interconnect the system so that you're not just reliant on the one?
What needs to happen for you to call this upcoming session a successful one?
For me, I think some of the big successes would be the continued work in the behavioral health world is helping continue to provide more funding out there to build out parts of the system that are missing right now. Is we know that people are boarded in hospitals right now because the next facilities aren't available. So it's getting the startup dollars out there to make sure that we can be building out that part of the system. And continuing to work, I was meeting with some folks earlier with the counties, is how do we get counties to help become partners in this and saying, we need to have more facilities. Let's make sure they're not all concentrated in the metropolitan area. Just talking to the county, says what is their role to make sure that we're getting the services provided, but across the areas so that we don't have people in northern Minnesota having, say, a child who needs intensive services, having to come down to the cities here and driving 4.5 or 5 hours. We have much better outcomes when we can keep people closer to the support networks so that the parents can be there on a regular basis, because otherwise that can add to the trauma and make healing slower instead of quicker. So it's making sure that we're building out that system in a way that is readily accessible so that people can heal as quickly as possible.
Well, Representative Fischer, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome, and thank you for the opportunity.